Today's episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast is brought to you by Baylor Scott & White Sports Performance Center, athletes made here. The Sports Performance Center was developed with one goal in mind: to maximize human performance through movement and recovery. Their team of expert performance sports coaches and trainers will guide you to achieve your performance goals. That's the Baylor Scott & White Sports Performance Center, located at the Star in Frisco. This episode is also brought to you by Allen Dental Studio. Located off Bethany Drive in Allen, their office was designed with you, the patient, in mind, which means an excellent and enjoyable experience. From cosmetics to implants, you deserve a perfect smile, and Allen Dental Studio can make that happen. Also, don't want to leave out another longtime friend of the podcast, Texan Senior Residential Care Homes. With locations in Carrollton and Dallas, Texan Senior Residential Care Homes offers an affordable, high-quality alternative to senior living. Call now at 469-400-7650. That's Texan, spelled T-E-X-S-E-N, Texan Senior Residential Care Homes. Welcome to another episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. My name is Matt Welch, being joined by Brian Murphy and Taylor Raglin. Week 3 of high school football season is upon us, so let's preview some of the marquee matchups in our coverage area. Of course, starting with our game of the week as voted on by y'all. Appreciate everybody for going to the website, starlocalmedia.com, and voting on this week's poll. Game of the week, and if you're just going to talk like that's the stature of a game as far as just ranked team versus ranked team, they're honestly, regardless of classification, there might not be a more high-profile matchup in the state this week. Friday, 7:30 p.m. out at Highlander Stadium in Highland Park, the number 1 ranked Scots, the 3-time defending Class 5A Division I state champions, welcome Frisco Lone Star, number 3 ranked in 5A Division I. So definitely a heavyweight showdown in non-district action. So, Brian, you've got plenty of familiarity with this matchup. Mm-hmm. You saw last year, and probably the most, I don't know, like, if you could have laid out a manuscript on what to expect between Highland Park and Frisco Lone Star heading into last year's matchup, when they were both ranked in like the top 3 in the area in offense, and then you got, I mean, a 10-7 ball game.
It was the most bizarre football game I've probably ever seen in my life. And I want to add, if this didn't win game of the week, I was going to be so mad.
You were pushing for this one, man. You were lobbying hard on social media. You were trying to get the Lone Star community in.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I even tagged a bunch of the players, and Marvin Mims was one of them, who we'll see later on this podcast. But yeah, this is game of the entire state, like you mentioned. It doesn't matter which classification. This is going to be so good. Do I think it's going to be 10-7 again? Not a chance.
Because that's the thing, because I do remember last year when we were talking about this, we were just kind of outlining, like, wow, these are 2 of the most explosive offenses in the area through the first 2 weeks, and it's kind of been that same way heading into this matchup. Lone Star is, I mean, well, that's what you get when you schedule Richland and Denton. Lone Star is the number 1 offense in Class 5A in the Metroplex, 637.5 yards on average. The number 1 scoring offense, 65 points per game. They are number 3 in total defense at just 146 yards per game allowed, and they're number 1 in scoring defense, 1.5 points per game allowed. Again, competition is got to keep that in perspective. Highland Park's offense has been not far behind. They are number 3 in total offense with 606 yards. That's insane, though, that you have, I mean, just 600-yard offenses. That's just, God, that's ridiculous. And then the number 2 scoring offense at 59 points per game. Not going to find them on the defensive boards. That's what happens when you play Rockwall in a 66-59 shootout, but that's Rockwall. Highland Park's traditionally pretty stout on that side of the ball. With Highland Park, they're the program that obviously the readers are not as familiar with, given that we don't cover them and whatnot. So just some quick backstory on the Scots heading into this matchup. We've all heard of Highland Park. We all know what they bring to the table. They're, again, the 3 consecutive state championships. They've won 47 of their past 50 ball games. It is just a brutally efficient offense, defense, and every aspect of that program is just a machine. On the season, so far it all starts with quarterback Chandler Morris, Arkansas commit in his second year with the program, one of the top dual threat quarterbacks in the state, and most efficient. He's completed 70% of his passes. he had those video game-esque numbers in that week 1 matchup against Rockwall, where he totaled 664 yards of offense and 9 touchdowns. Numbers that if you're playing Madden and you set it to rookie and pick the best team in the game against the worst team in the game, it's going to be really difficult to even replicate a performance like that. It's just outstanding what that kid was able to pull off against one of the better teams at the 6A level in the Metroplex. One thing about him, though, that's notable early on, at least, he has been a little susceptible to the turnover. He's thrown 4 interceptions so far, notable considering he only threw 6 all of last season. He's thrown 2 in each game, so definitely something to kind of take into consideration in previewing this matchup, considering the caliber of that Lone Star defense. But he's obviously a dual threat quarterback. He is very explosive in the run game, averaging 10 yards per carry. He's already scored 7 rushing touchdowns through 2 games. Out of the backfield, he's joined by Will Anderson, who's taken the reins as their lead running back. Fortunately for Lone Star, they won't have to worry about Finn Corwin at wide receiver. As low scoring as that game was last year, he was one of the few players who really did pop out on that stat sheet. Had a really, really nice performance against the Rangers last year. But Ben Smith and Kay Savage have both, stepped up into that big play go-to receiver role as they're averaging more than 17 yards per catch through the air. Defensively, for as important as Chandler Morris is to the offense, Prince Dorb is that to the defense. One of the premier pass rushers in the state, an all-state performer last year. He had 21 sacks last season. Almost 20 quarterback pressures. He's committed to Texas. Again, there might not be a more devastating pass rusher at the 5A level. Then you've got in the secondary, Brock Bakich, some promising contributors within that the D-line and the linebacking corps. Overall, that unit had a really tough time against Rockwall, but again, Rockwall has maybe the best overall talent in the state in Jackson Smith and Jigba. Like I said, that game was 66-49. Rockwall hung 773 yards on Highland Park. But again, Rockwall's as good an offense as you'll find at the 6A level. They looked a little bit better the following week, though, against Mesquite Horn, a Horn team that was flying high after a big win over John Tyler. They held the Jaguars to just 25 points and only 37.5% completion percentage through the air. It's Highland Park. They're number 1 for a reason. They hardly ever lose a football game, especially at home, as we'll get to later on. But on the Lone Star side of things, Brian, what is through the first 2 weeks, what has been the read on the Rangers heading into their first legitimate test of the season?
Garrett Rangel. He is the real deal, the sophomore quarterback. There was the drama prior to the season. Literally a couple days before the season started, Galban, he went down with the injury, and then is Rangel ready? He's only a sophomore. Rayburn was really high on him, said he was a stud, and he is, man. He's thrown 9 touchdowns, thrown for over 820 yards in just 2 games, his first 2 games on the varsity level. It helps when you have Marvin Mims back. Yeah, 17 catches, 478 yards, 5 touchdowns so far. A game changer for them has been Jake Bogdan.
Okay.
He moved from slot receiver to running back, and that was an issue last year. They kind of carouseled through some running backs. Darren DJ Smith was in and out of the lineup, with injuries and stuff last year. Running the football was tough. They relied a lot on Julian Larry, the dual threat quarterback from a year ago, and that running game really stalled at times. And if you remember, that Highland Park game in week 3 is when Lone Star's offense started to sputter, and that was the main concern. And then they only hung, I think it was 10 points on Little Elm, and then they struggled, through district play. Offensively, they only scored 14 against the Colony. Granted, that was a good defense there, but this offense is different, man. And that's, you can say Garrett Rangel, he can really air it out, but he's really got the weapons. When you have Marvin Mims, and then Jake Bogdan, I think is a serious game changer for this team with their ability to run the ball. And man, Rangel just looks so good so far.
Any thoughts on just the defense then?
They're still
with what's in store with them having to slow down that.
They're still loaded. Jalen Ford is there. Alessio Rusalio is leading the defense linebacker position, middle linebacker there. Oh man, Noah Bolton, the younger brother of Nick Bolton. He's in the secondary. They've moved Torrin Pittman from linebacker to safety, 6'4", rangy guy to replace kind of Trey Taylor's role. This defense hasn't skipped a beat. There's a reason why they haven't given up a touchdown this year, and I'm kind of shocked. I'm shocked and I'm not shocked. I know it's Highland Park. I know they're Allen of 5A. It's hard to pick against them. But man, Lone Star, they should have won this game last year. And I think, that was last year, but I think Lone Star is that much better this year. I'm not saying Lone Star is going to blow Highland Park out.
No, I don't think it's possible.
No, not at all. But Lone Star, you know, I think they win this game.
Really?
Yeah.
We can get to our predictions in a bit. I know you're ready to go.
Man, this is my pick of the year here.
I was curious because I did want to get your perspective on that game last year, because again, like, this was the game of the week at this time last year, and we were previewing this, saying a lot of this, I don't want to say the same stuff, but I mean, preparing for a matchup between two of the most explosive offenses in the area, and we got anything but that.
It was so weird. Yeah. Highland Park scored the first drive of the game. Punt, turnover. There was 13 punts in that game, 3 total turnovers, 2 missed field goals, and then it took a game-winning field goal in literally the final second for Highland Park to win that game. It was 7-7 from the final play of the second quarter up until the final play of the fourth quarter. Yeah, Lone Star didn't score in this game until, you know, with 18 seconds left in the second half. It was just so bizarre. And yeah, like I said, 13 punts. I don't think we're going to see 13 punts in this game, especially with an improved Lone Star offense and then an even better Highland Park offense. You mentioned something that concerns me. You know, this one is at Highland Park. I've never been to a game there at Highlander Stadium, but you know, you got to think they have the edge. Last year, that game was at FISD Memorial. So we'll see if that plays a factor in it as well.
Let me tell you a little something about Highland Park and Highlander Stadium, Bryan. So 4 years ago, they lost a non-district game to Pulaski Academy. Pulaski Academy was the real gimmick-heavy juggernaut out of, I believe it was Arkansas. They were the school that never punted, ran all sorts of just gadget plays and whatnot. But they came, you know, to Texas, and they actually took it to Highland Park. It was like 40-13, something like that. But that was Highland Park's first home loss in a long, long time. That snapped an 84-game home winning streak that dated back to 1998, and that is to a team that is not in Texas. And so it still stands that in Randy Allen's 21 years as Highland Park's head coach, they have never lost a home game to a team from Texas.
It's only fitting that their first loss under Randy Allen will be by a team called Lone Star.
But yes, so you see like what they are up against, because again, like it just isn't, you know, it's one thing to be an improved team, and I fully believe that Lone Star is. It's one thing to be an improved team and be good enough to the point where you can go into, again, a place where Highland Park is damn near invincible and find a way to get it done, versus a team that has shown, I mean, the thing with Highland Park is, like, they really do have a lot of Allen-esque qualities to them, and that's why it is so tough for anybody to go against them in just high-leverage, big-game scenarios. Even in that opener against Rockwall, like, they won the game 66-59. They were down in that game 24-7. In the second quarter, and then they tied it up before the end of by quarter's end. I mean, that team has such a short-term memory, and they've got so many guys that have kind of been through the fire and won these high-stakes games. Something that, you know, unfortunately for Lone Star, they just haven't shown yet. They've been right on that cusp, right on that periphery of being able to score, like last year against Highland Park, being able to get that signature win, but just falling just a hairline short.
See, that is concerning, because Highland Park has been battle-tested, you know, with one of the best 6A teams, and then Mesquite Horn, another really good team there. And, you know, Denton, I was seeing things on Twitter, you know, on Friday, Denton, they're really optimistic. They thought they had a chance, and then I was keeping up with the game, and it was like...
What's that based off of?
It was, I don't know. I don't know. I think it was just trying to, you know,
fire. They played them last year, too.
Yeah, they did, but this was way worse. It was 50-something to 0 at halftime. But, you know, Lone Star just hasn't played anyone, and I'm hoping that doesn't hurt them.
But it was the same way last year too, because again, the schedules were the same, and they did make short work of Richland and Denton heading into that Highland Park matchup. So again, it was.
But they beat Richland and Denton by even more this time. So maybe I don't know. I'm taking anything I can get right at this point.
Taylor, what's your read on this matchup? You know, we had to fill out our picket line this week, and you had to arrive on a conclusion for this one.
I did, and I don't think it was particularly hard, because you said it was 84 games before they lost. You figure that's 4 years or so of home games, so another maybe 15 or wins. You're looking at about 100 wins or something versus a single loss in the last 20 years. Yeah. I mean, it's just odds that I can't. It's like Allen. You just don't pick against them at home. You just don't. And I think that
or ever.
Yeah, I mean, or ever, but especially at home, and especially with Highland Park at Highlander, teams just don't go in there and have a good time. and Rockwall, that game against Highland Park, Rockwall's offense is, I would say on par with Lone Stars, if not better. I mean, they have a threat, just like Marvin Mims and Smith and Jigba. I mean, it's very similar in Highland Park. We've already talked about how that game went and how they kind of outlasted Rockwall. Put up just gaudy numbers, across the board. And I could see, we've talked at length about, I don't see another 10-7 game this year. Yeah. I mean, that would be even more bizarre, I think, if that kind of similar result happened this year. I think Lone Star gives them a game. I think it's competitive, at least for, maybe 3 quarters or so. And then, Highland Park's going to do Highland Park stuff. It's really hard for me to go against that track record, that pedigree, that offense, and just kind of the expectations surrounding Highland Park. So, I don't know. I want to say it wouldn't shock me if Lone Star won, but it really would just because of the track record at Highlander. I don't think it would shock me as much as, some of the other potential upsets and that sort of thing. It wouldn't be completely out of the blue, but, I just don't see it.
Because you look at the last year's matchup, just combing through just the raw box score numbers, there's a lot about that Lone Star should like, at least based off that performance. They outgained Highland Park. They committed only 1 penalty, which I think that's almost like when you're playing Allen, you cannot commit the boneheaded mistake because Highland Park they're a team that, as the old cliche goes, they're not going to beat themselves. It was just the turnovers that seemed to really kind of be a bit of a bugaboo for them, losing the turnover battle 3-0 last year. But they did a decent job on Chandler Morris. Held him to 234 yards passing, only 10 yards rushing. It was, but at the same time, like, now you have to ask, okay, well, that was Chandler Morris's 3rd start at Highland Park, and when you think of what happened after the fact and him going on to win a state championship and all of the experience gained through that, now 1 year later you're getting a far more seasoned version of him, whereas you have a player like Rangel, who, for all his promise, is again in the situation that Chandler Morris was in last year.
Even younger, even more experienced.
Making his 3rd start and his first real.
And you have to go to Highlander.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the mental factor.
Richland and Den, they're just, those defenses can't approximate what Highland Park is going to bring to the table. So that's another thing that has me, leaning towards the Scots in this one.
I've been told Rangel won't be phased in this game. He's cold-blooded. Now, if this game, say, was
to be fair, would you hear otherwise?
He's not ready. We're going to lose.
He is terrified.
We're not going to be able to do this. He threw up 4 times thinking about it.
That would be something if I was told that. I'd probably keep that to myself. If this game was at Toyota Stadium, y'all think it's
I still take Highland Park.
Yeah, it's the Allen syndrome. Unless there is tangible evidence to go against them, they've won 47 of their last 50. They've won the past 3 state championships, and I'm sure, obviously, that run's going to end at some point, and obviously, they'll lose another home game at some point. But until, like I said last week on the podcast, we were talking our picks for Boyd and Marcus. I'm an evidence guy. I need to see it first before I can really buy into it. And I mean, there's nothing that has led me to believe that Highland Park is just going to all of a sudden lose a home game after having not lost one to a Texas team in over 2 decades.
Well, I'll put my picket line life on the line in this one.
So what does that mean if you
Does that mean
lose?
Just automatic last place? So what are you talking about?
Oh, I don't know.
You don't make a pick for the rest of the season?
I'm just risking it for the biscuit. That's all I'm saying.
So yes, that's as far as where the picket line lands on this one. Bryan, you were the descending vote.
Surprise.
You were going for Frisco Lone Star. Myself, Taylor, Kendrick Johnson, Devin Hassan. We are starting with Highland Park in anticipation of this very high-profile game. I'm sure it's going to be a good one. I don't think Highland Park's going to just run them off the field or anything. It is number 1 versus number 3 in the state, after all. It's not like there's a reason this matchup is so high-profile. But yeah, that's kind of where we stand on our game of the week: Highland Park versus Frisco Lone Star. Friday, 7:30 p.m. out at Highlander Stadium. One of the key players in that matchup is Lone Star wide receiver Marvin Mims, who is the subject of our student athlete spotlight. Bryan had a chance to swing by Lone Star to talk to Marvin in anticipation of the big game on Friday, and we will see what he had to say after a word from this sponsor. Today's podcast is brought to you by Star Local Media. 14 newspapers and websites with a print distribution of 270,000 homes and monthly page views of 600,000 online. Star Local Media, your community voice for news. And now, let's get back to the podcast. All right, I'm here with Marvin Mims, senior wide receiver at Frisco Lone Star. Marvin, I know we spoke a few weeks ago. You committed to Stanford. Now
looking back, a few weeks after, how much of a weight has been lifted off your shoulders, and how excited are you about that?
I'm pretty excited. I feel like going to my senior year, I just don't want to be worried about our team and what I can bring to the team and what the team has around, especially as being a captain, being one of the lead guys. And I feel like getting recruiting out of the way was a major point in that.
Now, when we spoke about your commitment, Stanford's tough to get into, and before I ask you football questions, what's your senior year been like, in the classroom? Because I understand you're taking a lot more classes than a normal kid your age would be taking.
Yes, sir. It's been tough. I'm not gonna lie to you, it's been tough. With the extra classes and staying up late in football, and then going home and doing homework, and then the weight load in the classroom has been pretty hard.
All right, now enough about that. Let's talk football. Y'all have had 2 blowout wins to start the year. Haven't given up a touchdown. Y'all have put up 1 million points. What's kind of been gelling? What's kind of been the recipe to that success so far?
I feel like it's our camaraderie as a team. I feel like we're a way different team this year, and I just feel like on both sides of the ball we have really good leaders, and we have guys that will listen to each other. And there's not much bickering on either side of the ball. It's like, hey, you do this, and we'll talk about it, and we'll just buy into it. We're just one big team. I feel really good about that.
Now, before I ask you about the quarterback, one guy that I feel like has really made an impact that y'all didn't really have at that position last year was Jake Bogdan. Coach Rayburn, has kind of compared him to Christian McCaffrey. That's really high praise. Talk about how important he's been to this offense.
Yes, sir. Well, I've known Boggy since we were little. We used to bang heads with each other. But, he's a real big impact on the offense. With him, he can go receiver, any receiver position. He can go running back. He's a real plus to our offense. He can do anything, and he does everything we ask him to do, and he's just a great player.
Now, are you surprised about, how good Rangel has played so far? This 15-year-old kid stepping in there and just slinging it over 800 yards and 1 million touchdowns. Are you surprised? Are you expecting that, or what's kind of going on there with him?
I don't think anyone here is surprised. We know Garrett. He's been here last year. He got here this year. He got here last year. I just feel like no one knows offense better than Garrett. So whenever I knew he was starting, I was just like, well, he knows the offense. And most of his thing was just if he was going to go out there and be nervous. And me and him talked, and I couldn't be more proud of him.
Now, this is a different opponent y'all are facing this week. This isn't Denton. It's not Richland. You're facing the 3-time defending state champion, Highland Park Scots. What is that, that preparation like, when you're facing, the #1 team in the state?
Yes, sir. No one around here, we go out there and practice. There's no, lack of focus because everyone knows what we're leading up to Friday. That's a great team on the other side of the ball, and we couldn't be more happy to have them on the schedule. It's going to be a big test for us. I feel like we're bringing a good team. They know we're bringing a good team. We know they're bringing a good team. It's one of the best games in the state, and I'm just ready to play in it.
Now, last year, y'all played against them in week 3, and it was a weird game.
Yeah.
It was a 10-7 game. 13 punts. I was at that game. What are y'all expecting this time around? Are y'all expecting another defensive slugfest? Not many teams, if any, were able to do what y'all did defensively against that high-powered offense, but what are y'all kind of expecting? Are y'all expecting another weird game, or what's that like?
We're going to go out there and play our game. I can't tell you if it's going to be 35-33, if it's going to be a blowout. Might be 3-0. I don't know. We're just going to go out there and play our game. They're going to go out there and play our game. We're just going to see how it comes out.
I guess you could say, to upset them or to beat Highland Park. Y'all don't go in many games as the underdog, but y'all might in this one. To pull off this victory, what are some things, or what's one main thing or a few that really have to happen to pull off this win?
We just have to play together. That's always a thing. We take every game the same. There's not really one that's more important than the other. It's like most people say, we got to go 1-0 every week. So basically, it's just, we played Denton last week. It wasn't, we're looking up to Highland Park. No, we have to go against Denton first, and then we'll look forward to Highland Park whenever it's HP week.
Now, I don't want to look too far ahead, but what would a win against Highland Park mean for this season and this program?
It'd be pretty cool. It'd be big, especially beat them at their stadium. I think they're 1-2-1 there, so that'd be pretty special. But at the same time, it's a non-district game. So, yeah, they can do all the articles and all that stuff they want about it, but at the end of the day, we still have to go and play in district. Whenever we get in district, hopefully be district champs, and then we have to maybe meet up with them and get into the playoffs. So, it's a game that means a lot, but at the same time, it doesn't mean much.
Now, you mentioned it on the road. The last time they lost there was to an out-of-state team, 5 years ago or whenever that was. They haven't lost to an in-state team in quite some time. I think it was since 1998. Was that kind of in the back of y'all's mind too? Have y'all thought about that? Do y'all put any thought to that? Hey, this team is really tough to beat at their place, or it's just it doesn't matter where y'all play them, y'all are going to play y'all's game.
At the end of the day, we're focused on us. And at the end of the day, I think that, I mean, we all believe here that we're the only team that can stop us, especially what we're bringing this year. You know, like I said, the camaraderie between us, it's like, I mean, it's amazing. Especially, it's a blessing to be a part of this team. I just feel like, you know, going there in their place, whether it was here or there, I mean, we're going to go out there and we're going to play our game.
Thanks again to Marvin Mims for taking the time to chat with Bryan for a Student Athlete Spotlight, previewing our game of the week for Week 3, Frisco Lone Star versus Highland Park. We had 4 other games that were up for the game of the week, and although they fell short of getting the big old glossy segment at the start of the podcast, we can quickly quick hit and make predictions for those games as well. If it wasn't Lone Star and Highland Park, my pick for game of the week would have been Prosper at Flower Mound. This one Friday 7 p.m. out at Neil Wilson Stadium at Flower Mound High School. This is a juicy matchup between 2 of the most high-powered offenses in the area. Both offense averaging at least 40 points and 420 yards per game. Flower Mound, you know, if we've ever spoken about Flower Mound on this podcast, we probably have mentioned the names of Blake Short and Pierce Hudgens throughout that. I think it's almost like mandatory that you have to do so when talking about Flower Mound and what they bring to the table. You know, it's those 2 doing their thing, leading the way for the Jaguars once again. Got a deep receiving core. Flower Mound is a particularly explosive offense. Prosper, despite all the skill guys they graduated, we talked about them on Monday's podcast. They have definitely dominated in a word to start the year. Jackson Berry, JT Lane, Tyler Bailey. You know, they haven't missed a beat despite all the guys that they lost. So this was a game last year that was, you know, kind of threw everybody off the scent on Flower Mound because this was actually a blowout win in favor of Prosper. Flower Mound just could not protect the ball, committed something to the tune of like 6 turnovers, I want to say. It was like a 51-21 loss, and really kind of it was, I think we were talking about it as like, okay, this is Prosper's first true test at the 6A level, which they passed with flying colors. And then I mean, Flower Mound clearly grew up from that as they went on to win a district championship, and now have a bit more experience on their side in this matchup. And I think that was ultimately what led me back to picking the Jaguars in this rematch. I think it should be a good one, though. How about you guys? Where'd y'all land on this?
I took Flower Mound as well. You know, kind of throwing out last year's result, like you said, it was a surprising one, I think. Then, you know, but one that makes a little more sense looking back. I think the Prosper certainly, you know, still very, very good. I think that kind of the variety of threats that the Prosper offense has kind of worked in their favor. I mean, you look at last year, it was kind of, I don't want to say it was a one-horse show, but, you know, Wayne Anderson and kind of that offense, it was a different look. And now it seems like there's a lot of places that Jackson Berry can go, and things are a little bit more varied. But, you know, Flower Mound, I think, is too much. Blake Short and Pierce Hudgens with another year under their belt, that entire offense is so explosive. You know, Matt and I think, are both very high on Flower Mound as being right there with Hebron and 6-6A. You know, and that, you know, I was talking earlier this week, that's maybe the only game when it comes up that I'm going to take Flower Mound to lose, you know, at the moment. You know, if they go out and get, you know, smoked by Prosper again, then we reevaluate. But, you know, I think Flower Mound is just really, really talented, really veteran, you know, have a lot of momentum after that first ever district title last year, and only got better. So, yeah, I'm taking the Jaguars, but should be a really good one.
You took the words out of my mouth. You know, Prosper, they just have a lot of weapons, a lot of different ways to score despite graduating those guys. And you know, they've given me no reason to pick against them. You know, they have two blowout wins just like Flower Mound, but they blew Flower Mound out last year. It's not going to be like that this year. Blake Short's not going to throw 3 interceptions against Prosper again. This game should be close, and you know, it's pretty much a coin flip. It could go 50-50, and so why not pick the Eagles?
This was a just about a coin flip. If we had an even number of people on the picket line, it very well might have been a 3-3 split. Otherwise, it was 3-2 in favor of the home team, as Taylor, you and I, and Devin picking Flower Mound, Kendrick and Bryan going Prosper. Let's see, next game. Let's see, I'll let one of y'all take the reins on this one. Lake Dallas at Frisco Reedy, Friday 7 p.m. out at the Ford Center at the Star, a District 7-5A Division II opener. What are you guys anticipating in this?
This game is all sorts of up in the air now. I don't know what the hell to make of anything in 7-5A D2 anymore. I guess I'll get my pick out of the way. I'm still going with Reedy. You know, I'm not panicking. You know, that hard on Frisco Reedy yet. I don't even know if the game was on the picket line. So these are the official picks, I guess. You know, but I'll take Frisco Reedy. I think that, you know, Reedy has certainly taken a step back to the pack in that district. Looked really bad against the Colony. A lot of that has to do with how good the Colony is. You know, but Reedy, I think, is more in line with maybe some of the other programs in that district. But Lake Dallas can't keep Brandon Ingle healthy. Lake Dallas, I think, is with Trevor Moon at quarterback, who's very serviceable. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with Trevor Moon as a high school quarterback. He's just not Brandon Ingle. He doesn't have that kind of big play explosiveness. And that kind of slots Lake Dallas into Tier 2 in this district, I think, without Ingle completely 100%. I think this is going to be an opportunity for Reedy to kind of reassert, we're not that bad.
Yeah.
We're still Frisco Reedy. I think in this district where the competition isn't the Colony, there's not a team in this district even in the same ballpark, in the same stadium as the Colony. So
even after dropping an egg against the Colony, I'll be shocked if Reedy does not blow Lake Dallas out of the water. Bounce back win. That's this team. Granted, a lot of those guys are gone from last year. They've been around the block. They're not going to lay an egg 2 weeks in a row. I think especially if Ingle plays, is Ingle supposed to play or is he?
I don't know, but I do know that in both games now he was questionable leading up to week 1. Didn't play in the second half after getting hurt, and then Tim Glaze we had out there covering the game last week. Similar situation. I don't even know if it was the same injury. I think that's kind of what's really setting him back, is that they don't even know if it's the same injury, if he's just kind of injuring other parts. And I mean, it's going to happen when you rely on a guy to that extent. But I don't know if he's going to be 100% or not. But if he's not full bore, I don't think Lake Dallas.
I mean, I think it's fair to say that he's not going to be 100%, even if he does play. And that's the fact, is if they don't have their most well-rounded player, their best overall athlete, and the most pivotal component to their offense being able to put up the requisite number of points to compete with the Frisco Reedy, it's just tough to go against the reigning district champions. I mean, and again, I know the optics behind the Colony matchup are pretty awful to look at on paper and whatnot, but it's, again, I think that was a little bit more about the Colony. I'm not pushing the panic button on Frisco Reedy. I just think that versus last year, when a lot of their wins came by 4 and 5 touchdowns in this district, that's probably going to be, they're going to be in a bit more competitive.
And they could drop some games to the Lovejoys and Braswells and Friscos of the world if they have a bad night and somebody jumps out. I don't know if they're going to go on an undefeated run in this district this year, but like I said, I think Lake Dallas may be in that second tier underneath kind of that group of postseason teams. This
is their chance to make a statement win, because week 1 they couldn't do that against a pretty bad Plano West team. And then last week, I should say, was really forgettable. This is their chance, because they have Denison and Frisco up next after that. And Frisco looks maybe like the best team in this district so far through 2 weeks. Denison is no slouch either. If they drop an egg, against Lake Dallas, or if they still can't figure out who the quarterback is, because they've been going back and forth between Jalen Kitten and AJ Padgett. If they keep having question marks there and struggling to move the football, even if they struggle to beat Lake Dallas, I think it might be time to kind of hit the panic.
Oh yeah, I mean, if they go out and beat Lake Dallas by 10, kind of like that Plano West game, then I think it's really time to start being like, hey, what's going on here? What's going on?
Yeah.
Let's see. So yes, we are in unison in thinking that Reedy gets it done against Lake Dallas. Let's see. Next we have Mesquite Horn at Cedar Hill, Friday, 7:30 p.m. out at Longhorn Stadium. Both these teams enter this matchup very, very battle tested. Mesquite Horn drew matchups against John Tyler and Highland Park to begin the season. Cedar Hill played Allen and Denton Geyer.
You can't really ask for a tougher opening 2 than those two.
Good Lord. I got to see Cedar Hill, in their opener against Allen. Obviously they lost the matchup, but still had some moments. They do have a nice balance of between pass and run. They can. They've got the explosive playmaker, the Texas Tech commit Quinn Bright, who they just use all over the offense. One of those players who, if he gets in space, he's got a chance to take any play to the house. Their quarterback, Caden Salter, looked really nice. Had a tough time handling that Allen pass rush, but still was able to flash some big moments, especially with top receiver Cam Hutchings on some deep balls and whatnot. And then you had Mesquite Horn, which looked great against John Tyler. Obviously after the way that last season began, some questions over how was Mesquite Horn going to handle just about the same schedule after starting last year 0-7. They were able to get that first one out of the way very early as they took it to John Tyler 39-17. A great debut for new quarterback DeVazia Gabriel. And then they're loaded with skill guys, just like Cedar Hill is. They got Charles Crawford from Bishop Lynch. He has stood out early on. Kelsey Emery has been around that program for a long time. Yeah, I mean, I'd expect the points to come in droves in this one, but ultimately, though, especially with what Cedar Hill showed the following week against Geyer, who, I mean, Geyer was coming off just an absolute thriller in defeating Aledo, and then for Cedar Hill to come within a hairline of taking down Geyer on a neutral field and whatnot, that I think that kind of put into perspective that okay, you know, Cedar Hills, they've got a little something, so I trust them to continue building off that momentum and get the win over Horn.
Yeah, I don't think that Cedar Hill is going to drop to 0-3. I think that Allen game is a lot like the Colony and Reedy, in that it says more about how good Allen still is than than anything about Cedar Hill. You know, looking especially at that game last week with Geyer, like I said, it really just kind of puts in perspective, like, Allen, y'all are going to be all right. Like, y'all are still really, really good in the class of the state for sure, at least in the area. So, yeah, I mean, I think Cedar Hill is just too talented, you know, playing with Denton Geyer to that extent, a Denton Geyer team that pretty much everybody is really, really high on. You know, I think that Cedar Hill is going to kind of right the ship and get a win. I think, you know, Horn, talented in its own right, and a good win over John Tyler, a decent performance against Highland Park. I mean, Highland Park is Highland Park. They're going to do that to a lot of people, but I think Cedar Hill just has a little bit of an edge, and I think they will be pretty motivated, I guess, to say the least, to not be 0-3.
The picket line was unanimous in picking Cedar Hill to defeat the Jaguars on Friday. And let's close it out with our last game of the week nominee, a matchup that, this, in terms of just the sheer votes, this was second. A matchup that, you know, has a bit of a different overtone to it than a matchup like Frisco Lone Star and Highland Park. Plano West at Mesquite. Yeah. Friday, 7:30 p.m. out at Hanby Stadium. Taylor, just some thoughts on this matchup.
The interesting thing is that I think if you're Plano West, it's almost like looking 2 years into the future. You know, Mesquite is a team that, you know, last year was really kind of their breakout year, and now they're looking to take another step forward under Coach Fleener and really kind of continue building on an upward trend that they've kind of established in West under new head coach Tyler Sogup's trying to do the same thing. You know, they're 2 years behind, I would say, but it's kind of West's real opportunity to, you know, similar to week 1 against Reedy, to really show that they can compete with some better football teams. You know, West, I don't think had a shot to beat Flower Mound last week because Flower Mound is, you know, we went into it in depth when we previewed their game. I think that's just an offensive juggernaut, one of the best teams in the area at 6A. You know, so that was kind of to be expected. You know, but this is a shot for West to go out and play, you know, somebody maybe one weight class above them. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's a closer margin, and it's an opportunity for West to make good on some of the good things they've done. I talked to Coach Sokup this week. You know, he was happy with how they moved the ball against Flower Mound. I think he said they ran somewhere 60, 70 offensive. Like they moved the ball well. They had some possession. They weren't able to convert it into points, which is kind of, I mean, you have to to win football games, but you know, I think this is an opportunity to start doing some of those things, to take advantage of some of that momentum that they've been building, to show that they're ready to, you know, get on the path, you know, like Mesquite, to being relevant and competitive. I think Mesquite, you know, still wins this game. You know, I think that, you know, I think we all pick them as far as I know. I mean, it's hard to pick a team that's lost 28 games in a row. You know, but if Plano West goes out and loses by, you know, 10 again, 13, something like that, and really competes and scores some points. I think the one thing that I want to see Plano West do is score 21 points. You know, I want to see them lose a game 34-21 or something like that, and just show that they have some amount of kind of offensive life and ability to score points. So, yeah, I mean, I took the Skeeters. I don't think Plano West pulls it off, but, you know, an opportunity to continue moving in the right direction, certainly.
Talk about last year being a breakout season for Mesquite under head coach Jeff Fleener. It was, you could argue the West game was the breakout game for quarterback Dylan McGill. I believe he threw 5 touchdowns in that win over the Wolves. He hasn't really had to do a whole lot as far as finding the end zone, you know, thus far, as they've started the season 2-0 with wins over Lake Highlands and Grand Prairie. Instead, it has been that run game anchored by Ladarius Turner, averaging 7.1 yards per carry and 3 rushing touchdowns. It'll be interesting to see how this rematch goes. Like I said, like, what would it be like? Don't you kind of want to be, though, to be the one that picks the West win?
Yeah.
To be able to guess right and pick the one that snaps the streak.
Hey, it may come later this season. Y'all don't know. Y'all don't know.
Nevertheless, though, in the interim, that said, it's tough to go against Mesquite, especially playing at home in Hanby with just the momentum that they've shown early in the season. Their coach Fleener, I like the Skeeters to get it done. And you and I are not alone, Taylor. Mesquite was unanimous in the picket line to defeat Plano West on Friday. And that'll at least do it as far as some of the marquee games in our coverage area go. As far as games that we will be out and covering, I should say, what's on y'all's coverage docket for Friday and Saturday, I guess, for you?
Plano East and Saxe, Kimbrough Friday, and that is a prove-it game for East. It's one that I don't think East will be favored to win on paper, but they got to come out, the Panthers do, and show some sort of life and show that, they're moving.
Plano ISD football period needs to do that this week.
There's a lot that needs to happen for PISD this week to kind of convince us that any of those teams have a shot at making the postseason, because right now, I don't know. But I'll be out there for that one between the Mustangs and Panthers.
Bryan, how about you?
Safe to say, Friday I'll be at Highlander Stadium for Lone Star Highland Park. And then Saturday I'll be at Keller ISD Athletics Complex.
That sounds right.
Sure. Something like that. I'll be in Keller as Little Elm takes on Keller Central as they look for win number 2.
Let's see. I will be, I've got a Thursday, Friday coverage slate. I will be out in Irving at Joy and Ralph Ellis Family Stadium, formerly Irving School Stadium for Carrollton Creekview versus Irving Nimitz. And then on Friday, I will be out at Clark Stadium in Plano to cover Plano and Rowlett, a pivotal game for both teams in their non-district finales. Rowlett, a team that has been on the receiving end of a couple of vicious beatdowns from one from Prosper, another from one of the who was that? I forget who the second one was against. Rockwall. It was against Rockwall. That's right.
They got smoked by Rockwall, which no shame.
Yeah, no shame
in that.
It happens. And then Plano, fresh off the victory over El Paso Eastwood, as they try to build off that momentum and try to get some positive vibes going into district play. It should be a fun one. Those games typically are very competitive, so we'll see what that is in store. That game is Friday, 7 o'clock out at Clark Stadium, and that is at least what we have on tap for our Week 3 coverage slate. Folks, that'll do it for this episode of the podcast. Bryan and Taylor, appreciate you guys for tagging along. Folks, enjoy the rest of your week, and we will talk to y'all later.